It is 13 GMT. Thank you for joining us. We begin with renewed diplomatic efforts to reach a ceasefire in Gaza as the Israeli bombardment of the Strip continues. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Saudi Arabia, where he's been meeting with regional counterparts. Blinken says there has been measurable progress in the humanitarian situation in Gaza in recent weeks. Washington's top diplomat says there's an urgent need for a ceasefire to stop the suffering of Palestinians. And he says President Joe Biden is urging Israel to take all necessary steps to prevent civilian harm.
The most effective way to address the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, to alleviate the suffering of children, women and men, and to create space for a more just and durable solution is to get the ceasefire and hostages home. President Biden has insisted that Israel take specific, concrete, measurable steps to better address humanitarian suffering, civilian harm, and the safety of aid workers in Gaza.
Well, in his seventh visit to the region since October, Blinken has been holding talks with leaders from the GCC on Gaza's governance and reconstruction after the war. The Gulf Cooperation Council is calling for Israel's military operation in Rafah to be stopped with an immediate truce in Gaza. Qatar's Prime Minister and Foreign Minister says any escalation of the conflict threatens peace in the region. Blinken's visit comes as Hamas negotiators are expected to meet Qatari and Egyptian mediators in Cairo.
The ongoing talks and consultations and coordination of positions is very important for boosting our strategic relations and dealing with the dangerous situation in the Middle East. A lot of efforts must be exerted to sort out the military escalation for the sake of all countries in our region. We need to bring peace to the Middle East. The international community has failed to find a solution to the Palestinian cause. Thus, we now see the bloodshed everywhere and every day in the Gaza Strip.
Al Jazeera's Hashim Al-Bara is following all these latest diplomatic developments for us, joins us now on the News Hour. So a great deal of diplomacy in the region, in Cairo, in Saudi Arabia, a lot of different strands, it would seem. What is the common purpose? What is the objective today?
The Americans are hoping to achieve a ceasefire agreement between Hamas and Israel, and this explains why Hamas has dispatched its deputy leader, Khalil al-Hayya, along with the team in Cairo to try to pin down the details of that agreement. The Americans are hoping that this could be conducive to something broader, more stability in the region, but also the potential for a broader normalization between key Arab countries and the Israelis. But now, it was interesting to hear Antony Blinken saying that the Israelis have offered Hamas an extraordinarily generous deal and that Hamas should accept the terms of that deal. Hamas has been dismissing accusation. It was delaying the deal, saying that there are legitimate demands which need to be met. And
because their main condition is that there's still a permanent ceasefire in Gaza.
Exactly. The Americans still talk about calm. Hamas says we need an indication of a ceasefire, prolonged ceasefire, permanent ceasefire. This is something they are trying to pin down. Also, they're asking for guarantees that the Israeli army is going to pull out partial withdrawal from Gaza that could be conducive to a complete pullout for the Strip before they commit themselves to a final agreement with Israel. Now, I've been talking to people about the chances for this to happen anytime soon, and they say we'll just remain cautiously optimistic about the potential for any breakthrough. I have to say that frustration is taking over more than a sense of optimism about a deal anytime soon.
We certainly have heard some frustration from the mediators from Qatar, for example, which has been involved in these negotiations.
They do.
Yeah.
They do. They've been waiting for this to happen over the last few months, only to see conflicting statements from the different parties to the point where the Qataris have been saying that we might reconsider our role as a key mediator if this doesn't happen. And they also would tell you that one of the key reasons why they're frustrated over this, because they believe that both parties are using this for maximum political benefits, and to the point where they also say that we can tell clearly that for Benjamin Netanyahu, his political survival is more important to him now than a permanent agreement with Hamas.
Now, another interesting aspect of the meeting in Riyadh between Blinken and the regional leaders there is this idea of normalization with Saudi Arabia, which was on the table before the war in Gaza began on October the 7th. And it's still, it seems, being talked about because we heard Blinken mention it. But how can they talk about normalization when there is an actual conflict?
There is a reason why they would like to see that happen with Saudi Arabia. It's the protector of Sunni Islam, the most powerful Sunni nation on earth. Two, it has the two holiest places in Islam, Mecca and Medina. If Saudi Arabia is on board and normalizes with the Israelis, you will see many, many Arab and Muslim countries follow suit. Now, after October the 7th attacks, the Saudis started to make a statement saying that basically they would like to wait until the Israelis solve the Palestinian issue. But having said that, today, the Americans in Riyadh are hoping to achieve two things. Reconstruction of Gaza, this is where they would like to get more financial commitments from Gulf nations. But ultimately, the final goal, along with the normalization, is to have a consensus among Arab nations, particularly the Gulf countries, that a new Palestinian Authority is going to be tasked with taking over Gaza and that Hamas's era comes to an end.
Hashim, thank you very much. Always good to get your insight on all this, Hashim Ahelbara. Now let's go straight to our correspondent, another of our correspondents, Bernard Smith, who's in occupied East Jerusalem. Bernard, as we heard from Hashim there, Hamas delegation due in Cairo for these ceasefire talks that are resuming. What about the Israelis? Will they be joining?
Well, the Israelis have a delegation ready to go to Cairo tomorrow. That's Tuesday. That depends on what the response from Hamas to Israel's proposal is. You heard there, again, Antony Blinken calling it an extraordinarily generous proposal. Now, it's understood that the Israelis are asking for fewer than about 40 of the 130 or so captives being held by Hamas. And in return for that, they'll release Palestinian prisoners, and there'll be a move to a second phase of a truce, which will offer a period of sustained calm. The wording is very important there because we know that Hamas has been insisting throughout previous talks that they get a complete end to hostilities and the removal of Israeli forces from Gaza so that Palestinians can return to their homes, particularly in the north of Gaza. So will this offer of a period of sustained calm be enough for Hamas, considering that they've been asking for this permanent ceasefire? We expect to hear what Hamas have to say in the next coming 24 hours or so. Ultimately, it's up to Yahya Sinwar, Hamas's leader in Gaza. He always has the final call on these things.
Thank you very much, Bernard. Bernard Smith reporting there live from occupied East Jerusalem.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.